Glad that you are here, taking a little bit of a break from the week, from homework, from whatever you got going on, to hang out with us for a little bit. We have got a new series in the event that you were not here on Sunday. We've got a new series, and the series is titled Expectation. It is a Christmas series. It's a 7-part series. We started it on Sunday in Genesis chapter 3, and we continue tonight in Genesis 12. We'll be in Genesis 22. We'll be in Numbers 24. So we're going to jump around, travel just a little bit tonight. But it's expectation, and the expectation, as far as Christmas is concerned, is building. You may have put out a list to your family and said, hey, these are the things that I'm really wanting. Maybe mom or dad asked, hey, what do you want for Christmas? And you just laid it out there. This is what I want. And the expectation is building with each day that goes by. And even more so, we get excited about the thought of the expectation of Jesus being born and what that must have been like. And what we found out on Sunday is that God had it planned from the beginning of time, since Genesis chapter 3. That as soon as sin was introduced into the world, that God immediately put into motion his plan to take care of that sin, to conquer it, to pay for it, and to set us all free. And so we are continuing to learn about that plan as we go through each of these studies. And so we're going to be looking at a couple different books tonight. Let me see if I can get these on the screen for you a little bit here. 2 things that we're looking at tonight, seed and star. Seed and star. Of course, I will explain each of these. But you can see, for those of you that take notes, that seed, we are going to be looking at Genesis 12:3 and Genesis 22:18. We will read some extra verses in there, but those are the specific verses that you will need where you can find these specific topics here. These are subpoints. And then you will see the star, or main divisions, I should say. And then you will see star, which we will see in Numbers 24:17. Now, Christmas is very, very exciting for lots of different reasons. But oftentimes, when it comes to Christmas at church, what can oftentimes happen is, okay, let's go to the Isaiah 7 passage, which we will do, actually, in the next couple of weeks. Let's go to Micah. Let's go to the normal Bible passages, which I love. I love all of those classic Bible stories, Bible passages where even in the Old Testament, the birth of Jesus is prophesied, and I love all of that. However, there are so many more verses and passages that have to do with the coming of Jesus, the birth of Jesus, who he is, who he would be when he was born, and all those different things. So we get a chance to look at some of those, and here we are. We've come across some tonight. We've been through some of these before. Why in the world? Why are we calling these Christmas verses? Well, we'll see tonight why that is, and we'll get into, actually, let me show you something here. This is where we were on Sunday morning. In Genesis 3:15, we read this, and I will put enmity. That means I'm going to put violence. This was God speaking to Satan. I will put violence between you and the woman, and between, you can see that I have it underlined there, and between your seed, Satan, and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. And so that was the very first prophecy recorded in the Bible concerning the coming of Jesus, the birth of Jesus. And as we look at that as a standalone, we go, okay, God is promising to put violence between Satan's seed, or Satan's people, and the woman's people. And the woman's people, that would obviously mean some human being, some person is going to come, because a woman, her seed, meaning her offspring, her kids, and women give birth to kids, so there's somebody coming that's going to bruise or crush Satan's head, but Satan will bruise or crush his heel. And so, there's some mystery there. And tonight we'll have some more mystery. Now, the benefit that you and I have is here we are, when this was spoken, here we are thousands of years later. And we look back and we go, oh, obviously he was talking about Jesus there. And in the verses that we look at tonight, we'll do the same thing. We'll look and we'll go, oh, well, obviously he's talking about Jesus there. However, when these prophecies were first spoken, when these events first took place, it was not clear. Wait, what? What do you mean the seed and the, who's the, you and the woman, and what are you talking about here? And again, without knowing what it is that we know tonight, we might read the prophecies and go, yeah, I don't really know what you're talking about. But let's take a look at it, beginning in Genesis chapter 12, where we see the seed here, carrying that theme, running with that theme that we saw in Genesis 3:15. Well, God continues to speak about seed. Let's find out if it's the same thing. In Genesis 12, verses 1 through 3, and we're going to focus on verse 3, but I do want to read verses 1 and 2 because this is one of my all-time favorite stories in the Bible. Because it is so very daring. And I've got to be careful that I not get stuck on these other two verses and not have enough time for verse 3. So let me try and read through here and move on with the story. Verse 1 says, now the Lord said to Abram. Now Abram ends up getting his name changed to Abraham. Okay, so same guy, Abram and Abraham. And here's what God said, Yalak, Y-A-L-A-K, Yalak. It means to get out or go, but it can also mean come. And so God here says, get out of your country. So it sounds like God's kicking him out. Get out of your country. From your family. So leave your country, leave your family, and leave your father's house. He told him that because Abram and his wife Sarai, they were both living in his dad's home. But that was very, very normal. I mean, it's obviously very normal today because housing is so expensive and lots of times we have multiple families living together. But in that time, it was very normal for the dad, the family, to really just add on to the home. And then they would have the new bride in there, and the son and the new bride, and then the family would continue to grow and live together. But God says something serious. Get out of your country. Leave your family. Leave your father's house. Now, he's not telling him, when he says leave his family, he's not telling him to leave his wife. He's just saying leave your extended family, but then he gets specific. Leave your father's house. You got to leave your dad's house too. To a land that I will show you. Now, I told you the word yalak, get out, Y-A-L-A-K, yalak, means get out or go, but it also means come. Now, both of those are being used here. Here's how we know that. He's not just telling them, get out of your country and leave your family, leave your country, leave your family, leave your father's house, just go away. Because notice what he says at the end of verse 1, to a land that I will show you. If I'm just sending somebody away, I can't show them where to go. I have to go with them. I have to lead them. I have to take them there. So God is at the same time saying, Abram, I guess technically at that point, Abram, leave everything that is familiar to you. Leave everything that is safe. Leave everything that you know. I want you to leave it all, and I want you to come with me to a new country. That's kind of exciting, but it's also a bit terrifying. But that's part of the excitement, right? When you're going somewhere, when you're just, we love to use the word random, let's just randomly go somewhere, or let's just go, road trip, where we're going to go, I don't know, let's just go on a road trip. We love that thought of like, let's just hit the road and let's just get out of here and go see what happens. Where are we going to stay? I don't know, we'll just sleep in the car, we'll just sleep on the side of the road, we'll sleep under a tree or something. Some of you are like, no way. We can go out and adventure, but there better be a hotel every single night. 5-star service, right? But we love that idea of like, let's just get out of here. And God's saying, listen, let's go. Abram, Sarai, let's go. Let's get out of here. Leave this stuff behind and let's go. And so he's inviting him on this adventure. How exciting. But then what he does next is he gives them some assurance, some blessings. He says in verse 2, I will make you a great nation. Notice the trade. Verse 1, get out of your country. Verse 2, I'll make you a great nation. Leave your family. Verse 2, I will bless you. So you leave the safety of your family, and I'll bless you. And make your name great. So leave your father's house, and I'll make you Father Abraham. Had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham. See what I'm saying? He has a great name. We still sing songs about him. That's crazy because he was the father of faith. And so leave your father's house, and I'll make your name great. I'll make you into Father Abraham. And that's exactly what he did. And at the end of verse 2, and you shall be a blessing. Up to that point, we're not sure that Abram was a blessing to anybody. We're not really sure. We don't know much about him. We'll learn something about him in just a moment. Careful with those phones, man. Especially when mom's watching, huh? Careful. Now, listen. Has he been a blessing to anybody? We'll find out a little bit about him, but we really don't know much before this. Verse 3 says, I will bless those who bless you. This is God speaking to Abram. It's like, man, you leave. Follow me by faith. I'll bless those who bless you, and I'll curse him who curses you. In other words, here's what he's saying to Abram. He's saying, leave all of that safety, leave all of that security of your country, your family, your father's house, and I will become everything that you need. I'll give it to you, I'll become everything that you need. I'll bless those who bless you, I'll curse him who curses you. And then finally our verse, here in verse 3 at the end, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Now, again, reading that as just a standalone, we go, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. All the families of the earth shall be blessed. And in you all the families of okay, what exactly does that mean? Now, you and I, because we have the benefit of being alive now and looking back over all of the New Testament, all of the Old Testament, we know what that means. It means that the Messiah, Jesus, was going to be born through Abraham. He's the original Hebrew. And so we know that the Messiah is coming through his family line. But at the time that it was spoken, I imagine that Abram must have just thought, like, oh, okay, that sounds great. I don't know why all the families of the earth would be blessed through me, but okay. Now we're going to get some clarification in a little bit here as we get into to chapter 22. But for now, I want you to understand that at the end of verse 3, when he said, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed, that was a promise to Abram. You're going to have a family. You're going to have kids. And one of those family members down the line is going to be the Messiah, is going to bless all the families of the earth. Okay? Now, okay, we go, okay, yeah, that sounds great. Okay, it's fine, fantastic. But please, walk with me. You're in Genesis chapter 12. Go back just one chapter, chapter 11. You might have to turn the page. You might not even have to turn the page. But in Genesis chapter 11, we learn a little bit about Abram. At verse 29, then Abram and Nahor took wives. These are brothers. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai. And then it goes on to tell us about Nahor's wife. But look at verse 30. And this is what it tells us. Imagine this. But Sarai was barren. She had no child. In other words, Abram and Sarai were married, but Sarai could not get pregnant. Now, when we go back to chapter 12, verse 3, and we read God saying to Abram that in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed, and we go, wait, he's going to have kids, and one of those kids is going to eventually, one of those kids that he's going to have in his family is going to be the Messiah, Jesus? How's that even supposed to happen if Abram, the one that this is all starting with, Abram's wife can't even have kids? Now, if you read the story of Abram or Abraham and Sarai or Sarah, you find out that it becomes quite messy because they got a promise from God, and they decided, thank you very much for that promise, God. We'll take it from here. And once they did that, they messed it up pretty badly. Of course, God fixed it, but it had an effect on the entire world to this day, actually. But that's for another study for another time. Now let's get some clarification concerning this phrase, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Go with me to Genesis 22. We're all done with Genesis chapter 12. Let's go to Genesis chapter 22. Genesis chapter 22 takes place several years after Genesis 12. And in fact, by the time we open up to Genesis chapter 22, guess what Abraham has? Abraham obviously has a new name. It's not Abram, it's now Abraham. But also, he got a kid. He got a son. He's got a couple of sons, but here's the son of promise here. This is the son that God promised him. This is not the Messiah. This is not the one that is going to bless all the families of the earth, but it is a start, because when God promised him that, Abraham couldn't even have kids. His wife couldn't even give birth, couldn't have kids, couldn't get pregnant. But now we see many years later in Genesis 22, we see that Abraham actually has had a kid. Well, I guess he didn't have a kid. His wife did, right? But now they've got a son. And we're only going to focus on one verse, but I do want to read through this story very briefly. So I won't stop to give any explanations. We'll just read the story so that we have the context and all. Verse 1 of Genesis 22. Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham, and he said, here I am. Then he said, take now your son, your only son, Isaac, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah Alexander, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey, and took his 2 young men with him, those are servants, and Isaac his son. And he split the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. Then on the 3rd day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey. The lad and I will go yonder. Some pretty cool language there. The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. So Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it on Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand, that means the torch, and a knife. And the 2 of them went together. But Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, my father. And he said, here I am, my son. Then he said, look, the fire and the wood, but where's the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, my son, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. Prophetic. So the 2 of them went together. Then they came to the place of which God had told him. And Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order. And he bound Isaac his son and laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son in obedience to God. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. So he said, here I am. And he said, do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him. For now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its thorns. In other words, it was caught in a bush. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place, the Lord will provide, Jehovah Jireh, as it is to this day. In the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Then the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time out of heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, says the Lord, because you have done this thing and have not withheld your son, your only son. Blessing I will bless you, and multiplying I will multiply your descendants as the stars of the heaven and as the sand which is on the seashore, and your descendants shall possess the gates of their enemies. So he says in verse 17, I'm going to bless you and give you so many kids that Abraham, you're going to need a much bigger tent. They're not all going to fit in there. And then finally, here's our verse 18. Within this context, he says, in your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed because you have obeyed my voice. So working backwards in verse 18, because Abraham had obeyed God, because he had placed his faith in God, he was obedient to God, God says, in your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. So we have a little more clarification there from Genesis chapter 12, where God had said, in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Now he gives some clarification and says, in your seed, in your offspring, in your family, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. I love this. Look what God did. Look what God did. Let me show you something really cool here. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this before I move on. He gives him this promise of a universal blessing through Abraham. Now, it is the promise of a Messiah, of the Messiah, I should say, not a Messiah, but the Messiah. But it comes in this form, the promise of a universal blessing through Abraham. So through Abraham, the Messiah would eventually be born. We know that it would be a human being because he already said that in Genesis 3:15. But now we understand that Messiah, that Savior who's going to deal with sin once and for all, remember that? It's going to crush the head of Satan, is going to come through the line of Abraham. Let me show you something. This is really cool. Look at Genesis 3:15. And I will put enmity between you and the woman. Look at the underlined part. And between your seed and her seed. And then in Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you. I will curse him who curses you. And in you, all the families of the earth shall be blessed. What did he do? He combined the two, God did. He took seed and he implanted it here in Genesis 12, and then he used it in Genesis 22. In your seed, all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. When it was first spoken in Genesis 3:15, he's talking to Satan. And he tells Satan, listen, there's going to be problems between your seed and the woman's offspring, between your people and the woman's people. There's going to be a problem. But now he gets a little more specific, and he's speaking directly to Abraham this time, not to Satan, not to Eve, not to Adam. He's speaking directly to Abraham, and he says, in your seed, in your offspring. So now the message of the Messiah, the expectation grows. Because now people weren't just looking and going, oh, you know what? God made a promise in Genesis 3 that there's going to be somebody born from the woman that's going to crush the head of Satan. And they're not just looking randomly around, hoping to find some glimpse of the Messiah, but now they know there's this man named Abraham. And God took him out of Ur of the Chaldees, and he's leading him to some new land, some promised land, and he's taking him there. But we just found out that he told Abraham specifically that the hope of the Messiah is coming directly through his family. So now we have some clue. Whereas in Genesis 3, we were just kind of like, okay, who's going to give birth to the Messiah? Now we've got a family to follow. Now we look at Abraham and we go, wait a minute, Abraham and Sarah. Now we know. Now we had our feelers out. Now we understand that it's coming through this specific family. Now, as you know, as you can imagine, it's going to get even more specific in that. And in fact, we'll get a little more specific tonight. We'll get a little more specific here in just a moment. But how exciting that when you're looking for hope, where's it at? Where's it at? And then, boom, there it is. I've got 4 kids, you all know that. And over the years, they were involved in various sports. And there were times when they were at their game. and the rest of the family, we weren't sure that we were going to make it to the game or that we were going to make it in time. And I can remember times when we would show up, man, we'd be in the stands, and the race is about to start. They're about to pop the gun, and the race is about to start. And we get there, and then it's like, I would do one of these. And then one of my kids, they knew my whistle, and they would look to the stands like, where's he at? Boom, there he is. And they would see the family. And then there would be a greater expectation or anticipation, a greater hope in their heart. Now there was a little bit more excitement because it wasn't just coach there on the sideline yelling at them, but now dad's here, and dad's a madman, and he yells at us, and he'll scream and cheer. I don't yell at him like in a bad way, but just cheering for let's go. I didn't have a clue what they were doing. It was just I knew that they were in some kind of race, and let's go. But now, as the people are looking for the Messiah, okay, where's he going to come from? And then, boom, Abraham says, hey, I was told. Now, they begin to zero in on that family. But it gets even better. Let's turn to, and this is where we'll finish up because there's only two main divisions. We've seen the seed here. Now let's move on to the star in Numbers 24. Now we'll look at specifically verse 18. And in fact, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'm going to summarize this chapter for you because we're running out of time real quick. And we really don't need to read all of this story, although it is. Balaam is one of my favorite Bible characters. Now, he was a rotten guy. I do not expect to see him in heaven. He was rotten. He was a false prophet. He's just like a prophet for hire. Terrible guy. He got the children of Israel into trouble. But the fact is, and Balaam is the one that talked to his donkey. Remember, his donkey spoke to him? Because he hit the donkey, and the donkey said, hey, why are you hitting me? And then Balaam just cracks me up every time. I've read it so many times over the years. But he just talked to him. He's like, because you're taking too long. Let's go and move it along. It's like, Balaam, your donkey's talking to you. That's not a big deal, huh? But he just carries on this conversation with the donkey. But here we have, in Numbers 24, the story of Balaam when he's supposed to be cursing Israel. And I'll summarize it for you because there was this king named Balak from Moab. And Balak says, Balaam, I'm going to give you some money. I want you to come, and I want you to prophesy something wicked over the children of Israel. I want you to curse them. Well, Balaam shows up, and actually God had talked to him and said, hey, I don't want you to go. But if you go, you're only going to speak what I tell you to speak. Balaam's like, what can I do? So he shows up, and Balak is like, okay, pronounce a curse over him. And Balaam opens his mouth to speak a curse over the children of Israel, and only blessings come out. Balak gets so mad. He's like, I'm not hiring you to bless these guys. I'm hiring you to curse them. And then Balaam's like, hey, what can I do? God's in control. He's like, well, let's try it again. But this time, maybe it's the mountain. Let's go to a different mountain. And they go and switch mountains. It's a hilarious story. But in the midst of that, during Balaam's fourth prophecy, he says this, beginning in verse 15. So he took up his oracle and said, the utterance of Balaam, the son of Beor, and the utterance of the man whose eyes are opened. So he's indicating that his eyes have been opened. The utterance of him who hears the words of God. So not only are his eyes open and he can see into the future, but he can hear the words of God. Verse 16, and has the knowledge of the Most High, who sees the vision of the Almighty, who falls down with eyes wide open. So Balaam is indicating, my eyes are open spiritually. I can see into the future. I can hear God speaking to me. I've got a knowledge of the Most High. And he's saying something. I have a vision of the Almighty, of God. I'm falling down. My eyes are wide open. And in verse 17, it says this, I see him. I said verse 18. I'm sorry, verse 17. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come out of Jacob. A scepter shall rise out of Israel, and batter the brow of Moab and destroy all the sons of tumult. What? Okay? What? We're in the Christmas season, Pastor Chris, so we must, I see the star there, so I guess maybe we're talking about the star. You would be right. Here's what this prophet says. I see him. As he's looking, he already said his eyes are open and he's looking. He can see and he can hear, and he's bowing down and his eyes are wide open and he's looking at this vision of the Almighty that's been sent from God. And he declares to Balak, I can see him. I can see him. But not now. In other words, I can see him in the future, but he's not here right now. And I behold him. I can see him, but he's not close. He's far away. And then he describes, a star shall come out of Jacob, a scepter shall rise out of Israel. Now, we've heard of Jacob and Israel. We go, okay, Israel, that's the land of Israel, I guess. And there's going to be a star and a scepter. A scepter would be like one of those, like a cane that a king royalty would use. That was a scepter. It was a symbol of their royalty. A star shall come out of Jacob and Israel. Here's what you need to know. Jacob and Israel are the same. When you read the story of Jacob, Jacob got his name changed to Israel. And sometimes he's called Jacob, and sometimes he's called Israel. And sometimes God calls him Jacob, and sometimes God calls him Israel. But they're one and the same. So when he says a star shall come out of Jacob and a scepter shall rise out of Israel, it's poetic, but he's saying that the star and the scepter are going to come out of the same place. Now, again, we might go, well, he's just talking about Israel. That's not necessarily talking about Jesus. Oh, who else could be a star? And if we're talking about a scepter or royalty, who else could fulfill that? But as far as our study is concerned, here's what we need to know. We found out just a few minutes ago that there's a promise made to Abraham that the Messiah was going to come through his family. You go, okay. But here it's talking about Jacob. Jacob has a grandfather. Anybody know who his grandfather is? Who is it? Abraham. So now, we just went from Genesis 3 and the woman saying, God saying to Satan, hey, the woman's going to have a kid. Okay, that's like, the earth is eventually going to be filled with kids. Like, where's the Messiah going to be? Well, then when we went to Genesis 12 and Genesis 22, we found out, we got a little more specific, and God said, well, through Abraham. It's not just out there randomly. I chose Abraham, and through Abraham, the Messiah is eventually going to come. Well, now we just found out it gets even a little bit more specific, because in verse 17, it's not just going to come through one of Abraham's sons, but it's going to come through Isaac and then to Jacob. Jacob being his grandson, Isaac his son, and then Jacob. And we're finding out here that this star shall come out of Jacob. Now, what star are we talking about? Are we talking about the Christmas star that the wise men were following? Well, perhaps. I'm okay with that. I like that. And perhaps that's exactly what he's saying. That this star, given this indication, you can imagine if you were an Old Testament person before the New Testament ever came along, and you're studying the Bible to go, okay, where's the Messiah going to come? We know that there's going to be some kind of Savior. Well, I don't know. In Genesis, it says this. In Numbers, it says this. It talks about a star coming out of Jacob. And then all of a sudden, the wise men show up. And what do the wise men say? Hey, we saw a star in the east. Where's the king? Where's the one that's been born king? A star and a king, a star and a scepter. And so these were all clues. They were clarifying the anticipation, the expectation was building, expecting the Messiah. Now they can expect it not just from the human race, from the woman, but now they can expect it from the family of Abraham, but even more so, they can expect it from the family of Jacob now. Now we're whittling down the choices. Now we're beginning to get some clarification, and we're beginning to see things a little clearer and go, okay, wait, the Messiah really is coming, and God's got a plan. A star shall come out of Jacob. Let me show you something really cool here. I'm sorry, again, I get all excited. Start teaching, I forget to put my points up. The star was going to come from Jacob. The scepter, indicating that he would be royalty, a king, that's Jesus, was going to come from Israel. Jacob, Israel, same thing. But check this out. Check this out. Look what Jesus said. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David, which, by the way, was prophetic and messianic, but different study. And then look what he says, the bright and morning star. The bright and morning star. The bright and morning star. This is Jesus. Now again, you and I have the benefit of being over here 2,000 years after the birth of Jesus. So we can look back and go, oh yeah, it's all clear. Genesis 3, Genesis 22, Numbers 24, sure, it's all clear, man. It all makes sense. But as they were getting these little pieces, they were not understanding all of it. But God was giving little clues. Now the question is this, why would God give little clues? Why not just drop it on them all at once? Why give little clues? Well, I don't know specifically. There may be some other reason. Then I've got a theory, but it may just be a harebrained idea, and I don't really know. And when we get to heaven, we'll find out why exactly God just gave clues and didn't just drop the whole thing on them back in Genesis 3:15. Like, listen, Satan, there's this guy coming. His name is Jesus. He's going to crush you. Why didn't he just lay it all out there? I don't know. But here's what I think. This is my theory. I think it was to build anticipation. I think it was to train his people to search the scriptures, to be on the lookout. Because now, as they get these little clues along the way, now they're looking like, where's it at? Where's it, what's going on? Now they're, as I said before, their antennas are up and they're looking like, oh, where's Jesus? Where's the Messiah going to come from? And I read a verse to you in our previous study from Luke 3:15, where it said, now as the people were in expectation and all reasoned in their hearts about John, whether he was the Christ or not. So they were expecting. By the time Jesus was born, the expectation, the anticipation, the excitement of it all had been building for thousands of years. Everybody was looking, or at least those that were looking for the hope of Israel, those that were looking for the Messiah. Now they're locked in, and they're going, yeah, you know what? Here we are. We're looking for God, and where's the Messiah? And then finally, Jesus again in Revelation 22:16, pointing out that I'm the star that was talked about, that Balaam, that rotten old guy, talked about in Numbers 24, 22, whatever it was. I'm the one. I'm that star. What a wonderful, wonderful truth. What a wonderful truth for this Christmas season. That we can be so sure that Jesus was the one that God had planned to send all along. There was no other. It was only Jesus. And Jesus was the only one who fulfilled all of the hundreds of prophecies completely, to a T. And you and I get to celebrate that this year, along with all of the stuff, man. The lights and the presents and all of it. We get to celebrate the fact that we know that Jesus wasn't an accident, that it wasn't random, that God had a plan, not a plan A, not a plan B, just a plan. He didn't need any other plan. It's just one plan, and that plan was Jesus. And we know that. And that's why the season brings us so much joy, because we know, It really was all about Jesus, right? It wasn't just some sign that you saw at Hobby Lobby. Jesus is the reason for the season, right? It wasn't just a sign. We know. That's what the Bible explains to us. What wonderful, wonderful news. Father, thank you so much for tonight. And Lord, as we